I did not think for a minute I was having a heart attack. Why would I? They were going to get a chainsaw and cut through here. I almost didn't think it was true, but I knew it didn't feel good, but it couldn't be true.
What did you think was going on? Tell people what that is. Your arteries are too clogged.
Coronary artery bypass graft.
Go big or go home.
They don't get vessels from a package. They get them from the patient.
It is a remarkable story. So let's let Joe tell it. I have a phenomenal story that's going to be told by my friend Joe, who just had 5-vessel heart bypass. That means 5 different arteries in his heart, or around his heart, were clogged, so he had to get them replaced. It is a remarkable story. So let's let Joe tell it. Okay, everybody, here he is. It's Joe McMullin. And I have just been hyping up your story with anybody I can talk to because I think, number one, it's so instructional, it's motivating, but it's also just, it's inspiring. I mean, what, today is 7 weeks out for you?
7 weeks.
It's incredible. Yes. So, okay, I named this Joe, the Meat Wagon, and the Chainsaw. So why did I do that? Because those are the words you use in communicating about this. So just tell people what happened.
8 weeks ago and one day, we were out of town and I had a heart attack. And I didn't know it. And I thought it was indigestion. And I kind of endured it and went about my normal couple days there while we were out of town. Even went on a couple runs that didn't feel good at all. And upon returning to our home, I then, that morning, when I finally went to the hospital, I had a very unsuccessful run attempt that morning. And that's when my wife said, this isn't right. Let's go and get you checked out. And
okay, well, let me ask a couple of questions, though,
Sure.
about that. So when you said the run wasn't quite right, can you give people some background? Like, sure. First of all, I didn't tell people you are a former Navy pilot, so someone who's really thinking about fitness a lot. But what does that mean your run didn't feel right and it didn't
Sure.
go well?
Yeah, so I've been a lifelong runner. And for me, that means just I'm consistent, right? I'm consistent. I'm not a marathoner, but I'm consistent in my runs for at least 4 a week. And, those are, I probably run 5 miles, 3 or 4 times a week. So, just consistency, certainly no gold medals. But I know how I feel because I'm consistent in that. And that Friday morning, that basically kind of maybe hour 12 of having my heart attack, or hour 8, whenever it was, I was winded. My legs were heavy. It was winded. Now, we were a different place. It was very humid with some tremendous winds. And I thought, oh, this is just a real crummy day. But I stopped and walked. And I don't do that. And so then I was running with my bride and I said, all right, I'm going to, let's keep going. And I did. And I stopped and walked again. And I thought, oh, this is I just don't feel great today. And so how it didn't feel right to me. The next run, when I was at home, it was a cool morning and it should have been a great run. And I could barely get out of my neighborhood. My legs were so heavy. And that felt really weird because I hadn't felt that before. I felt like I had a piano on my back. And I'm 54. I know I'm getting slower. So of course my runs don't feel as good as they did 10 and 20 years ago. I've accepted that. And again, I'm no speedster, but I kind of know what I know. And I just knew it just didn't feel right. And I stopped and walked and then tried to run home. And that's when it changed.
What did you think was going on? Did you
no
sort
idea.
of do an assessment and figure out?
No, you didn't. I had no idea because, of course, I didn't even think of my heart. I didn't at all. I just felt, I guess I'm sick, but I'm kind of a grinder. Mm-hmm. So if I have a cold, I'm still going to work out. I'm still going to run because it helps me. It makes me feel good and so forth. But Yeah, I did not think for a minute I was having a heart attack. Why would I?
Nor did you think you needed to go see a doctor.
No. Now, I do have an advantage of living with one, full disclosure, so that helps. But I also don't I think I whine and complain. So it had to be serious for me to tell my wife, I don't really feel good. And that's when
Yeah.
she was like, wait a minute, tell me more. So
Yeah. So what happened when you went to the ER?
so I was shocked because I was actually going to my wife's ER and seeing her colleagues, but I wasn't there on a friendly note. I was there as the patient. But quickly there were tests that were done. The one I remember was most notable was the blood work for, I can never say this word right, troponin, I think was the
Yeah,
number.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a
Okay.
marker of heart. When there's an injury to the heart, this chemical leaks out into the bloodstream. So that's what that is, troponin. That's great.
So that was the big surprise for me because I had heard, if I remember the numbers correctly, that I heard the number 1200. And I heard that the normal number, because this was a conversation now that was being had between the doctor and my wife, that the normal number was six. I assumed 600. So I thought, just twice. To come to find out that the digit six, as in this, is the number you want to have as opposed to 1200 and rising. So that's when he then shared with me, the doc, that I had a heart attack. I was shocked. I didn't. I almost didn't think it was true, but I knew it didn't feel good.
Hmm.
But it couldn't be true. And then they had the EKG as well. Those are the two. I guess those are the two markers that then say, no, this is you've had an event. And that's when I was like, oh boy, okay, what next?
So why didn't you think it could be true?
The traditional high risk factors for heart disease, which I kind of only knew because I knew I didn't have any. So like the main ones you hear about, do you smoke? No. Are you overweight? No. What's your cholesterol story? Okay, it's not that high. No one's forced me to get on the statins yet to lower it. And then all those other
And
comorbidities
your
that,
blood pressure
yeah, I've never had no one's ever told me anything about my blood pressure. So
or diabetes? Yeah.
yeah, no, none, no,
You
no,
don't
no,
have
no,
any
no,
of those, right?
none of them, none of them. So that's why I just didn't think it could
Yeah.
happen to me. Couldn't happen to me.
So what happened next?
So that's when they said that we've got to get you to the main campus. I was at a satellite, so I had to go to the main campus. And I thought, okay, well, we can drive there. And then they explained to me that since I was hooked up on the IV, that no, I had to go by meat wagon to the main campus. So I was a little surprised by that
And to
because
you,
I
a
was like,
meat wagon is an ambulance. Is that right?
yes, yeah, the taking the meat. So I was a little bit surprised because I thought, I don't really need this. I mean, I walked in here. I kind of had a run this morning that was not great, but I certainly could be a passenger in this vehicle as opposed to being in the back. Thankfully, they didn't use lights and sirens, and I was able to, go in a nondescript way through the back door. So,
Why
and
is that important?
because I didn't think it was alarming at that point,
Yeah.
and and I do know from again my significant other that oftentimes meat wagons are used for people that don't need them, and there are people that need them.
Oh.
So I
Hmm.
thought, why am I tying up something, tying up an asset that, when someone has a 911 call, because 911 was never called for this. I was never in extremis. So that's
Hmm.
in my mind. Clearly that was incorrect, but that I guess that was probably my mindset.
Okay. So the meat wagon got you to the other campus, and then what happened?
I guess, yeah. So they admitted me to the hospital, and I think I was in a room before I went to the cath lab. That's right. So I was admitted. A bunch of cardiology people came in, and those are all new words for me. Of course, cardiology I could deduce. All right, these are heart people, but I didn't know what that meant in terms of what the conversations were that then ensued, because I'd never met a cardiologist nor ever had a need to. So thankfully, now I have plenty. But what was the so the cath lab was the conversation. So they were running through all the standard set of questions about the risk factors and all that and so forth. So that's where eventually they decided, okay, we're going to get you to the cath lab here and pretty quickly. So that's what happened. I was in the cath lab, and that
Tell people
is
what that is.
yeah. So that is the heart catheterization laboratory.
Yeah.
Is my guess. So it was a medical procedure. I'm laying down, but I'm awake for it, which was a little surprising because then they fish what to me felt like, I guess, a camera through a vein in my wrist. So it could have gone through the wrist, and if the wrist wasn't available or useful, then they go through the groin area. But so the interventional radiologist, I now have to get the vocabulary right, is the one who does the heart cath. So that, for me, it was a guy. So that guy basically then drives his camera into my heart through my wrist.
So let's tell people what's going on here. So it's called a catheter lab because it's actually a catheter, which is like a tube. So we call it a lumen, that hole. That's what they slid up through your vessel or your vein or your artery to get the dye in so they could look at pictures and see what was going on. So it's actually not actually I don't know if the technology has changed, but in general, they're they're getting access to the inside of your arteries so they can see what's actually going on. That's why they take a lot of pictures and did they give you pictures?
Nothing I could take home and put on the refrigerator. No,
Oh,
I'll ask. I'll ask
I
for them.
think you should. You absolutely should. So anyway, that's what was going on in the cath lab. So what happened then?
So, and oh, by the way, I'm awake for it. So he's talking to me, and there is a screen where I could see, but the way I was positioned, I wasn't really able to see it. Not that I could be helpful at all to the process, but he was, I don't want to say he was alarmed because he certainly obviously is a professional and done this thousands of times, but he alarmed me when he said that we don't have the ability to do. He said to me, "You have diffuse coronary artery disease," which sound like a
And how did he
mouthful.
explain that?
Well, for me, I'm trying to remember the exact conversation. It was more around the idea that I can't put any stents into you because there's too much, I guess, disease slash, I don't say damage. That's a judgmental word,
Your
but there's,
arteries are too clogged.
yeah, yeah. I had too much, I was clogged up. So he couldn't put the stents in, which I had at least figured out enough that, okay, you throw some stents in. I think I'd heard some people have those. I've had some friends who had them. You get in, you get out, you're back at work the next day. But that wasn't what he could do. He even took counsel with a cardiothoracic surgeon before he finished finished his job, and then said, look, he says, I've consulted, and if I were to give you stents, that would not be good for you long term because it could be problematic and even preclude you from having other surgeries that you probably would need later. So that was alarming to me because then I thought, what's next if this is not what we're doing?
Now, on to the chainsaw part of the story. What happened?
So what's next is I was scheduled for a coronary artery bypass graft, cabbage, which was a lot of word salad for me, but it meant that they were going to get a chainsaw and cut through here, open that bad boy up, and then basically create new pathways for my blood to flow around my heart. My arteries weren't any good, so they had to bring in new ones. and I have a bypass surgery. So that was what I was set to have happen.
And how many new vessels did you get?
I got 5. Quintuple.
Go big or go home, Joe. Isn't that
That's
your
right.
motto?
That's right. I don't want to mess around. Let's get it all done. What
Yeah, wow.
what's alarming about that too, and again, this is very, very new territory for me, is that they don't get vessels from a package. They get them from the victim, from the patient. So it was didn't make, I didn't really necessarily have a lot of thought about where they take them from here. I'm forgetting those names, Dr. Lisa, the ones that are
It's okay.
from here. But
Mammary arteries.
thank you, that's it. So that's 1 and 2, and they still need 3, 4, and 5. So that comes from your leg. So they had to also um, cut those out. And to me, they feel like Twizzlers, right? So you got the long Twizzlers, and I guess they cut the long one out from my leg, and then maybe snip it a couple times, I suspect, because you got to get 5. And then, so now the new Twizzlers are there that are clear and ready to go. So that was the procedure as I know it.
Yeah, and I've encountered people who've had heart surgery, and I can say that you had the fastest recovery of anybody I've ever heard of. How long were you in the hospital?
So I was in the hospital a total of 8 days, Monday
Mm-hmm.
to a Tuesday, the following Tuesday, but my surgery was on a Friday morning. So Friday morning, and then I was released on Tuesday. So I think that might be 4 days post-op was my release date.
Okay, so yeah. So were you in the intensive care unit?
I was in I forget what they called it. Just drew a blank on that. Cardiac care, cardiac ICU.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Uh-huh.
I guess I was there for 24 hours in that,
24 hours, that's it.
and then
Yeah.
they took me to the floor. Yeah. So
But
it was,
basically you went home in 3 or 4 days, which
I
is
did,
pretty
I did.
incredible.
And I was thrilled to go home too.
And how is it now? So you're in week 7. What's happened? How are you feeling?
So I feel really good. Um, and I guess I would demonstrate. So last week's Saturday, so that would be 6 weeks and a day. So let me back up a little bit. I have been aggressive in my walking. That I was instructed to do as much as I could tolerate, and so I did. But the point to share is that I have felt good enough to start a week ago now, so at the 6 week mark, to do some slight running, jogging in those walks. So that's, I guess I feel good enough to do that. So that's, here with the physical part of it, um, is fine to do that, and the heart keeps working. So
Your story is so inspiring. So, first of all, now that you've had all these tests done, you've had such a remarkable recovery, why do you think you had a heart attack based on what you've learned?
based on what I've learned, so the answer to that question, because that was one I asked my cardiologist when I met that person. So how did I get here? So the current answer, and I'm continuing to learn, and I have an appointment 2 weeks from today with the preventative cardiologist. So I'll learn even more in 2 weeks. So I claim no expertise, but from my perspective, from what I've heard from the physicians and the teams that have treated me, they say, well, your LDL and that's the bad cholesterol, um, could have been lower, but they also
But what
introduced
is yours?
mine's basically average of 130 to 135 for the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay. An ideal LDL, low density cholesterol, is less than 100. So that's not bad. On the scale, it probably says it's just mildly elevated. So that's interesting.
That was my point when I said I can't be having a heart attack because I'm here and I'm not all the way
Yeah.
over here. So My particular cardiology team wants me below 70, but that's the
Wow. Can't do that without drugs, huh?
no, cannot, cannot. So the other prescribed drugs, the other piece of all of this that is new to me, and this is the lipoprotein A. And that was again some word salad for me, but it is the well, I'll let you describe it. That'll be better.
No, you go. I want to hear in your
Okay.
words what it is and why it's important because we
Okay.
need people to know about this.
Yeah. So the lipoprotein A, as I understand it, is another part of this whole kind of cholesterol study. And it is a test that they do, I'm assuming, on the lipoprotein to check, hey, where are you on the scale? And so, the output that is normal where you want to be is below 30, if I'm remembering correctly, doctor. Um, and I was above 60. So again, I was an overachiever on that particular area. Now, as I understand it as well, because I never heard the term before until I was in my bed when the cardiology team on the day I was admitted had run that test and had told me about it, that is something that is maybe newer in terms of understanding it, but certainly not something that's tested. I even went through my old online lipid panels to see if I could see if I had old ones, and I couldn't find that. So that's a test that was new to me, and certainly that was that is the piece that the cardiology team was talking about. That in fact that was the interventional radiologist who said to my wife, hey, there's something going on inside here. This isn't a fact that he has, cholesterol, LDL slightly elevated. In fact, the terminology they said was his cholesterol, my cholesterol, is not heart attack high. So it had to be something else. So again, in 2 weeks, I'll have this upcoming appointment with the preventive cardiologist, and hope to learn more about this. In fact, but certainly this is something they've called out.
Yeah. So LP little a is what we're considering a genetic marker, and a lot of people don't know about it, including doctors. If you're not seeing a heart doctor or cardiologist, most primary care doctors are not testing for this, and I think it's really important for people to know. You've inspired me, so I want to talk about that. All the people you've inspired. I've been slacking on my physical health for over 10 years now. I'm attributing it to too much streaming on Netflix, but but now I'm exercising every day. My diet wasn't terrible, but there are things I could improve, and so I thought, well, if this happened to Joe, whoa, like I really need to kick it into gear. So, what are you hearing from people? I'm sure you've told your friends and family about this, and are they freaked out, or what's happened?
Yes. So and thank you for saying that, Dr. Lisa. The One of the things that I thought to do initially was to um, put out a proof of life video, because I knew that some friends had heard, and then some friends that maybe I'm not in everyday contact or every week contact with had heard and maybe didn't want to reach out. So I recorded a video 1 week post-op, and I shared that. Again, it was my intent was proof of life, but also to um, just kind of share that, hey, this happened to me. And I can't tell you that at 7 days post-op, I had all sorts of grand visions of helping and spreading a message. But as I started to feel better and get responses from people on the first week, and then I made another one the next Friday, I got a lot of positive response. And in addition, I was able to share my progress too. So it became, okay,
Mm-hmm.
he's not dead. He's now just walking more and walking longer and whatnot. So, but I wanted to share kind of two messages. Hey, here's what happened to me, and I didn't have any risk factors. So, the inference being is that if you have some risk factors, you better get checked out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 54, so a lot of my friends are plus or minus that age group, and they might not have been checking things out. So, and they probably thought it couldn't happen to them. So that has been something to share. And what's been really positive, and certainly, Lisa, you are one of my main inspirers, is when people come back and share with me that, hey, I'm getting checked out. My own family members are have I don't say raced out, but certainly moved out quickly to get their tests and so forth. So to hear that people are listening to my story and getting themselves checked out, and in some cases, folks are also getting moving more than maybe they'd been moving in the past. So that's fun for me. It's inspiring for me, and quite frankly, those responses, they were helpful to me to just, okay, I got to keep going, got to keep going. So
Yeah, no. So thank you so much for that because I think about you all the time when I don't want to go exercise. It's like, I've got to do it for Joe. And it's like,
well,
really, I've got to do it for myself, right? But
yeah,
I think that the motivation really helps, and it's just a kind of a reality check. So, and I know that you didn't, plan to be a poster boy, but I'm sort of forcing you out into the open because I just think so many people can learn from your experience and also learn about the importance of, testing for the genetic marker because they might think they're okay. And we lose a lot of people to heart disease. It's the number one killer of Americans, and it has been both men and women. It's heart disease. So any kind of early intervention, I think it's really important.
yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say before we go? I'd really appreciate your time and sharing your story with folks.
Two quick things. One, I certainly appreciate you being part of my medical team, and I thank you for your friendship, but also your mentorship in this as well. And I guess the other thing I would say is that I certainly feel very blessed. I know I'm very lucky. It's not lost on me. I wrestled a little bit with this in terms of, I heard enough people share with me like, oh, thank goodness that that you made it and whatnot. And again, I didn't have a 911 event, but I do know that this certainly could have been a different outcome. And the other piece of that is that I feel so fortunate, so blessed that I don't have damage to my heart. That the expectation that I was given by my team of heart experts is that, hey, the early reads is that you can be fully functioning just as you progress through this. So I feel so fortunate about that because that could also be a different story. You could be left with some degradation of your heart output. So I know I'm lucky, I'm fortunate. I will be able to get back to doing living my life the way I was before, with some modifications, of course, as I get smart and learn more about it. But the physical activity, I will be able to get to that, and that's what I'm trying to do. Get there as quickly as I can to basically move on with my life. I feel very blessed and fortunate with that, and the tremendous care I have received from my team at the Cleveland Clinic.
Thank you so much, Joe. This is great, and yeah,
Happy to share it, and I thank you for nudging me along, but also helping me spread this word. I know you do tremendous work to educate people, and now I actually get to be a little bit of a helper. So I welcome the opportunity.
thank you, Joe. I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks, Dr. Lisa. I'll see you.